The night was cold, and the wind howled through the frozen forest. Snow fell heavily from the sky, covering the ground in a thick white blanket. A young alien girl walked slowly, her purple skin shivering under torn clothes. Her steps were weak, and her eyes were filled with pain and fear. She was the last of her kind in this place, the only one who had escaped the hunters. For 3 days, she had wandered through the snow, searching for mercy, searching for hope. Every time she saw light from a house, she ran to the door, knocking with all her strength. Every time she begged, "Please, show mercy." And every time the answer was the same: rejection. Doors slammed in her face, cold eyes stared at her with hatred. To them, she was not a girl, she was a creature, a stranger, an alien who did not belong. She counted them, one by one, the first door, the second, the third. By the 12th door, her body was weak, her voice almost gone, but she still whispered the same words, again and again. "Please, show mercy." Her heart was breaking, her legs shook as she walked deeper into the forest. The snow cut her skin, the wind burned her lungs, but she refused to stop. She told herself that somewhere, someone must still have a heart. The forest was silent except for the storm. The trees bent under the weight of the snow. The moonlight shone faintly, guiding her steps. She felt as if the world itself wanted her gone, yet something inside her whispered, "Walk, just one more step." Her memories haunted her. She remembered her village burning, the screams of her people, the hunters dragging them away. She remembered hiding, running, watching her world die. Now she was alone, truly alone. Every door that rejected her felt like another knife in her heart. Her body was shaking badly. She fell once, then again, her knees sinking into the snow. Her fingers were numb, her lips turning blue. She wanted to close her eyes and let the snow cover her, but her spirit refused. If this was her end, she would at least try the 13th door. Far in the distance, she saw it, a faint golden light glowing in the storm. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, hope flickered in her chest. She dragged herself forward step by step. Her breath came in sharp gasps, her legs barely moving, but the light grew brighter. It was a cabin, a wooden cabin standing strong against the storm. Smoke rose from its chimney, and the glow of fire shone from the window. It looked warm, alive, safe. She stopped at the edge of the porch. Her hand touched the wooden railing. Her body trembled, not only from the cold but from fear. What if this door was like the others? What if the 13th door slammed shut like the rest? Her heart whispered, "Please, let this one be different." Inside the cabin, a man sat by the fire. He was alone, his red coat hanging on the wall. His life was quiet, far away from the noise of the world, but when he heard the soft knock at his door, he froze. He had not expected visitors in the storm. He listened again. The knock was weak, trembling, desperate. The girl pressed her forehead against the door. Her voice was low, almost broken. "Please, show mercy," she whispered. Her tears mixed with the snow on her face. Her body leaned against the wood as if it was the last thing keeping her alive. The man stood slowly. He felt something stir inside him, a feeling he had long buried. Caution told him not to open. The world was dangerous. Strangers could not be trusted. But there was something in that voice, something that carried pain, loss, and hope all at once. He reached for the handle, his hand shaking slightly. The storm roared outside and the cabin walls creaked. The girl's body slipped lower, her strength fading. She whispered again, softer this time, "Please." The door creaked. Light from the cabin spilled out into the storm, and for the first time in her long, lonely journey, someone opened the door. Her eyes lifted, wide with disbelief. Inside stood a human man, his expression unreadable, but his eyes did not hold hatred, they did not hold fear, they held something else, hesitation, but also a spark of compassion. The girl's lips trembled. She whispered, "The 13th door." And before her body collapsed fully into the snow, she saw that he had not turned away. This time, the door had opened. The man looked down at the fragile figure lying in the snow. Her purple skin was covered with frost. Her torn clothes clung to her shaking body. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. For a moment he hesitated, wondering if he had just let trouble into his life. But then he bent down, his hands rough yet gentle, and lifted her into his arms. The cabin door shut behind him, shutting out the storm. The warmth of the fire filled the room, glowing on the wooden walls. He placed her carefully near the hearth, where the heat could reach her frozen skin. Her eyes fluttered open weakly, reflecting the flames. She whispered, almost too faint to hear, "Why? Why did you open?" The man did not answer right away. He fetched a blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. Then he poured water into a cup and held it to her lips. She drank shakily, coughing as the warmth touched her throat. Her body was trembling, but slowly her breath grew steadier. He watched her closely, his mind full of questions. She was not human. Her skin glowed faintly under the firelight. Her features were sharp, strange, yet hauntingly beautiful. But what struck He-Taung most was not her alien form. It was her eyes. Eyes that carried endless pain, loneliness, and a silent plea for life. "You should not be here," he said finally, his voice low. "No one will help your kind." His words were heavy, almost cold, but she did not flinch. She only lowered her gaze and whispered, "I know." Silence filled the cabin, broken only by the crackling fire. The storm outside roared against the wooden walls. The girl pulled the blanket tighter, staring into the flames. For a long time, neither spoke. The man sat across from her, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. At last she whispered again, "I knocked 12 times and 12 doors closed. I thought this one would close too." Her voice broke, tears glistening on her cheeks. "But you opened. Why?" The man stared at her, his jaw tightening. He remembered faces from his past, a woman's smile, a child's laugh, both lost in a war that had taken everything. He had learned not to trust, not to hope, yet here was this stranger, broken and begging for mercy, and somehow, against all reason, he had opened the door. "I don't know," he muttered at last. "Maybe because you knocked." The girl gave a small, fragile smile. It was the first smile she had shown in days. It flickered across her lips like the last spark of a dying flame. But even that small light made her look alive again. Hours passed, the storm outside only growing worse. The man gave her food, simple bread, dried meat, and broth. She ate slowly, as if each bite was a treasure. When she finished, her strength seemed to return a little. She looked at him again, her voice soft. "They want me dead." The man frowned. "Who?" Her eyes darkened. "The hunters," she whispered. "They burned my home. They took my people. I ran. I ran until my legs bled. They said no door would ever open for me. They said mercy is a lie." Her voice shook, but her eye met his with sudden strength, and they were right until now. The man felt a weight in his chest. He wanted to look away but could not. There was something about her words, about her pain, that pulled at his buried heart. He rose and moved to the window, looking out into the endless snow. His eyes narrowed, scanning the trees. He knew the hunters she spoke of. He had seen them before. Cold, merciless men who hunted anything different. "They will come here," he said quietly. "They will not stop searching for you." The girl's shoulders sank, as if she had known the truth already. "I know," she whispered. "I will leave when the storm ends. I don't want you to suffer because of me." The man turned back, his eyes sharp. "You would not last a night out there," he said. His voice was harsh, but beneath it there was a strange warmth, a strange feeling he thought he had forgotten. Responsibility. The girl's lips trembled. For so long she had been rejected, hated, left to die. Yet here, in this cabin, for the first time, she felt seen. She lowered her head and whispered, "Then why did you open? If it only brings danger." The man stared at her for a long time. Finally he sighed, his voice heavy. "Because I once prayed for someone to open a door for me, but no one did." Her eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was a fragile thread of understanding. Two souls carrying pain, bound together by chance. The fire crackled, shadows danced on the walls. Outside, the storm began to fade. But in the darkness beyond the trees, hidden eyes were watching. Hunters were moving silently through the snow. Their voices carried faintly on the wind. They were closer than either of them knew. The girl looked toward the window, her heart sinking. Something told her that safety was only an illusion. The 13th door had opened, but danger was already at the threshold. The fire burned. At low in the cabin, casting soft light across the wooden floor, the girl sat close to the flames, holding the blanket tightly around her thin shoulders. Her eyes followed the dancing sparks, but her mind was far away. She thought of the 12 doors that had closed against her. She thought of the screams of her people, the fire, the chains, the hunters. Her body trembled, though not only from the cold. The man sat across from her, silent, his face hidden in shadow. He studied her carefully, every movement, every breath. He had opened the 13th door, but he was still unsure. Was she a danger, or was she truly a victim? The storm outside was quieting now, but in his heart a different storm had begun. The girl noticed his eyes, sharp and filled with questions. She wanted to speak, but fear held her tongue. Every time she trusted before, it ended in betrayal. Yet this man had fed her, given her warmth, That small kindness was more precious than gold to her. Still, she whispered carefully, "If you wish, I will leave when the sun rises." The man frowned, leaning forward. "You will die if you leave," he said, his voice rough. His words were true, but she lowered her gaze. "I don't want to bring you trouble," she replied softly. "You already brought trouble," he said, but his tone carried no anger. It carried something heavier, worry. He rose and walked to the window. The forest outside was calm, snow lying heavy on the branches, but he knew what moved between those trees. Hunters were like shadows, patient, merciless. He turned back, his eyes steady. "If they come, they will not only come for you, they will come for anyone who dares to help you." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She understood now what danger she carried with her. Tears filled her eyes, and she whispered, "Then why not turn me away? Why not close the door like the others?" The man's chest tightened. He had asked himself the same question again and again. Why had he opened? Why had he let her in? But when he looked at her eyes, he found his answer. They were not the eyes of an enemy. They were the eyes of someone who had lost everything, just like him. "I once begged for mercy too," he said quietly. "But no one listened." His voice cracked, his fists clenched at his sides. "I will not be like them." The girl stared at him in silence, her heart trembling. She had been rejected 12 times, cursed, beaten, left in the snow, and yet here was a human, scarred and bitter, still choosing to show mercy. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "Then you are not like the others." A fragile bond began to grow between them. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of something close. The girl leaned closer to the fire. Her face softened as the warmth touched her skin. For the first time in many days, she felt a thread of safety, still thin, still breakable, but real. The man sat back down, his gaze still sharp. "You must tell me everything," he said firmly. "If I am to protect this cabin, I must know who hunts you." The girl hesitated, her hands clutching the blanket. Her breath shook, and then she spoke. "They call themselves the Purifiers," she whispered. "They believe no one but them has the right to live. They burn our villages, take our people, and when they find me, they will not stop until I am ash." The man's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. He had heard of them, whispers carried in broken towns. He never thought their cruelty would reach this far. Now he knew why her eyes carried such pain. The fire cracked loudly, and both of them turned their heads. For a moment, silence returned. But outside the cabin, faint sounds moved through the snow. The girl's ears twitched, sharper than his. She stiffened, her voice low. "They are close, T." He man rose, reaching for the old rifle that hung above his fireplace. His movements were calm, but his heart raced. He had lived alone for years, fighting no one, needing no one. Now danger had found him again. Because he had opened the door, the girl stood too, though her legs shook. She touched the edge of the table for support. "You should give me to them," she whispered. "If you do, they will leave you in peace." The man turned sharply, his eyes burning. "No," he said, his voice like steel. "They will not leave me in peace. Once you give them one, they always take more. That is their way." Her eyes widened, hope and fear mixing inside her chest. No one had ever said such words for her before. No one had ever chosen her life over their safety. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Then why do you risk yourself?" The man stared at her, his face hard, but his voice soft. "Because if I do nothing, I am no better than the 12 who shut their doors." The firelight flickered between them, and in that moment trust was not fully born. But something stronger than fear began to grow. A fragile trust, small as a flame in the storm, yet strong enough to keep them standing together. Outside, the snow fell heavier, covering the tracks of the hunters, but their shadows crept closer, their eyes searching. The cabin was warm, but danger was pressing in. The 13th door had opened, and now both lives were bound together by it. The night stretched long, and the storm finally grew quieter. The wind no longer screamed, but the silence that followed felt even heavier. The girl sat near the fire, her blanket wrapped tight, her purple skin glowing faintly in the dim light. The man cleaned his rifle slowly, his eyes sharp, every sound outside making him pause. Neither spoke for a long time, but both were thinking the same thing. The hunters were out there, waiting, searching. The cabin walls kept the cold away, but they could not keep out fear. At last, the girl broke the silence, her voice low. "You want to know everything," she whispered. Her eyes looked far away, as if she were staring not at the fire, but at her memories. The man nodded once, steady and calm. I cannot fight shadows, he said. If I am to stand against them, I need to know who they are and who you are. Her hands clutched the blanket tighter. For a moment she seemed afraid to speak, but then she closed her eyes and her words began to flow. My people lived in the valley beyond the mountains, she said softly. We were peaceful. We farmed. We sang. We raised our children under the stars. We thought the world had space for us too, but then the purifiers came. Her voice shook, but she kept going. They said we were poison. They said the world must be cleansed. At first we thought they were only words, but then the fires came. They burned our homes. They took our brothers and sisters. They dragged us in chains, and one by one, the doors of mercy closed. The man listened silently, his face hard, but his hands gripped the rifle too tightly. He had seen war before, but the cruelty in her voice cut him deeper than any blade. She went on, her tears falling quietly. My mother told me to run. She pushed me into the forest. I heard her scream, and then I heard nothing. Since then I have been running. Every door I knocked on turned me away. To them, I was not a child, not a girl, but a curse. Only this door opened, the 13th door. She lifted her eyes to him, shining with sorrow and a fragile hope. Why do humans close their hearts so easily? She whispered. Her question was not anger, but a wound that refused to heal. The man looked away, his jaw tight. Because fear is stronger than mercy for most, he said, and fear blinds them. His voice carried bitterness, but also truth. He thought of his own past, of times when he too had begged and no hand had reached out. He thought of the silence, the rejection, the cruelty that had shaped him. Now he saw the same silence reflected in her eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire popped softly, sparks flying upward. Then the man rose and went to the window. He pushed the curtain aside, staring out into the snowy darkness. His eyes scanned the tree line, searching for shadows. They will come, he said quietly. Not tonight maybe, but soon. The girl's heart sank. She had known it already, but hearing him say it made it real. Her voice trembled. When they come, you must not fight for me. You must give me up, or they will kill you too. The man turned, his eyes hard. You think I fear death? He said sharply. I have lived with death every day. What I fear is becoming like them, closing my door, closing my heart. Her lips parted, but she had no reply. For the first time, she felt the weight of his pain as clearly as her own. Two lives scarred by cruelty, standing together in a fragile cabin of wood and fire, she whispered. Then we are the same. The man sat again, slowly. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time he let his guard lower. We are not the same, he said softly. You still have hope. I buried mine long ago. Her eyes softened, a small tremble passing her lips. Then let me share mine with you, she said gently. Her words surprised him, stirring something deep inside that he thought was dead. The fire flickered lower. Shadows grew long. The storm outside faded into silence. But the silence was not empty. In the distance, faint voices carried across the snow. The hunters were near, moving slowly, careful and patient. They were closing in step by step. The girl tensed, her ears catching the sound before he did. They are here, she whispered, fear rushing back into her voice. The man grabbed his rifle and stood tall. He checked the door, the window, every shadow. They won't stop, he said. They will never stop. The girl's hands trembled as she reached for him, her voice cracked with desperation. Why risk everything for me when I am nothing to you? The man looked down at her, his eyes burning with fire. You are not nothing, he said. You are the proof that mercy still exists. The girl's breath caught in her throat, tears blurring her vision. The words struck her deeper than any wound. In that moment, she realized the truth. Trust was fragile, but it had begun. And though the hunters closed in, though danger pressed against the walls of the cabin, she was no longer alone. The fire burned low, the cabin stood in silence, and outside in the snowy forest, shadows gathered with weapons ready. The storm was over, but a new storm was about to begin. The night was still, the forest wrapped in heavy snow. The fire in the cabin burned low, its light flickering softly against the walls. The girl sat on the floor, her arms around her knees, listening to every sound outside. Her ears were sharper than his, and she heard it first. The crunch of boots on frozen ground, slow and deliberate. Her breath caught, and her eyes turned to the man. They are here, she whispered, her voice trembling. The man stood at once, his hand reaching for the rifle, his face hardened, his jaw set. He moved to the window and carefully pulled back the curtain. In the distance, he saw them, dark shapes moving between the trees. Torches glowed faintly, casting orange light across the snow. There were 5 of them, maybe more, moving like wolves on a hunt. They carried blades, spears, and strange guns that shimmered with cruel light. The man cursed under his breath. "They found us," he said quietly. The girl's body shook, her nails digging into the blanket wrapped around her. "They always find me," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Her voice cracked. "You should give me to them. If you do, they will leave you alone." The man turned sharply, his eyes burning. "I told you before, I will not hand you over." His voice was steel, and for a moment she stared at him as if he were a stranger. No one had ever spoken those words for her before. Her heart trembled, unsure if it was courage or madness that lived inside this man. The hunters came closer, their voices carrying across the snow. Cold, cruel laughter. The sound of men who enjoyed the chase. One voice rose above the rest, sharp and commanding. "She's near. The little creature is near. Check every cabin, every door. No one hides her from us." The girl pressed her hands over her ears, shaking. The words were like knives in her heart. Every door had rejected her, every voice had cursed her. And now they had come again, hungry to finish what they started. The man loaded his rifle with slow, steady hands. His eyes never left the window. He had fought before, and he knew the weight of battle, but this time felt different. This time he was not fighting for revenge. He was fighting to protect someone who had already lost everything. The hunters reached the clearing, their torches glowing bright. The lead stepped forward, his face pale and sharp. He called out, his voice echoing in the night. "We know she is here. Give her to us, and we will spare your life. Stand in our way, and you will burn with her." The girl's breath came fast, her body frozen with fear. Her eyes turned to the man, waiting for his answer. Her heart whispered, "This is the moment. This is where he will turn me away." But the man lifted his rifle and opened the door. He stood tall on the porch, the firelight behind him. The storm had passed, but snow still fell lightly, shining in the moonlight. His voice was calm, steady, but sharp as a blade. "You will not have her." The hunters laughed, cruel and mocking. "Do you think you can stop us?" the leader sneered. "You are only one man." The man's eyes narrowed, his grip firm. "Sometimes one door is enough," he replied. Inside the cabin, the girl's heart pounded. She crawled closer to the door, watching, her tears burning in her eyes. Never had anyone stood between her and the hunters. Never had anyone said no to them. She felt a strange fire inside her chest, fragile, trembling, but real. Hope. The hunters spread out, their weapons gleaming. Snow crunched under their boots as they encircled the cabin. The leader raised his hand, and the others froze. His smile was cruel, confident. "Then you will die for her," he said softly, and with emotion the attack began. The man fired his rifle, the sound shattering the silence. One hunter fell into the snow, his torch rolling away. The others charged forward, blades flashing. The man stepped back into the doorway, using the cabin as cover. The girl cried out, fear gripping her throat, but she also saw something else. He did not hesitate. He did not waver. He stood like a wall between her and death. The hunters shouted, their footsteps pounding. The cabin shook with the weight of the fight outside. The girl clutched the edge of the table, her mind torn between terror and awe. This man, this human, had chosen to fight for her when 12 others had chosen silence. Her voice trembled, whispering to herself, "The 13th door." One hunter's blade struck the wooden frame of the cabin, splinters flying. The man swung the rifle like a club, striking him down, but there were too many, too fast. The girl's heart screamed inside her chest. She could not sit still any longer. Her legs shook as she stood. She grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace. Her hands trembled, but her eyes burned. For the first time since the night her world burned, she chose not to run. She stepped toward the door, her voice low but strong. "I will not let them take me again." The man glanced back at her, shock flickering in his eyes, but in that moment he saw it. The fragile trust had become something more. Together, they would face the hunters. Together, they would fight. The night was no longer silent. The cabin was no longer only wood and fire. It had become a battleground, and in the falling snow, the 13th door stood open, a door that no threat, no fear, no hunter could close. Snow whipped through the clearing as the fight raged on. The hunters pressed forward, their blades flashing in the firelight. The man stood strong in the doorway, rifle in hand, striking and firing with deadly focus. The girl stood behind him, gripping the iron poker, her body trembling but her eyes alive with fire. The hunters shouted, their voices filled with cruelty. "Give her to us and live," one cried. But the man's voice cut through the storm, sharp and unshaken. "You will not have her." The clash was fierce, the sound of steel against wood, the crack of gunfire, the roar of human rage. The hunters moved like wolves, circling, waiting for weakness, but the man did not falter. Every move he made was a wall between them and the girl. Inside, her heart pounded, torn between fear and awe. 12 doors had shut her out, 12 hearts had turned cold, but this one man, scarred and alone, stood like a shield. The leader of the hunters stepped forward at last. He was tall, his pale face twisted with cruelty, his eyes cold as ice. He carried no torch, for his gaze itself burned with hate. "You are a fool," he hissed. "This creature is not worth your life. She is nothing, a stain, a curse." The man's hands tightened on his rifle. His voice was calm but carried the weight of thunder. "She is not nothing," he said. "She knocked and I opened. That makes her worth everything." The girl's breath caught, her eyes wide, tears falling freely. No one had ever spoken for her like this. Her body trembled, but not from fear. Something inside her had awoken. For the first time in her life, she was not begging. For the first time, someone else was refusing for her. The leader sneered, raising his weapon. "Then you will die with her," he said coldly. The hunters surged again, their boots thundering in the snow. The girl cried out, swinging the iron poker, striking one across the face. The man fired again, the sound echoing into the night, another body falling, but still more came, shadows in the snow, endless and merciless. Inside the cabin, the fire flared as if the room itself felt their struggle. The girl's hands shook, blood on her fingers, but she stood tall. Her heart whispered words she never thought she would feel again. "I am not alone." The hunters pulled back for a moment, regrouping, their breaths heavy in the cold air. The leader stared at the man, anger burning in his eyes. "You would choose her over your own kind," he spat. "You would betray humanity for a creature." The man stepped forward into the snow, his figure dark against the firelight. He looked straight into the leader's eyes, his voice low and steady. "No," he said. "I am choosing what makes us human, mercy, compassion, a heart." The girl gasped, her tears hot on her frozen cheeks. The words struck her deeper than any blade. The man was not fighting because she was strong, or useful, or powerful. He was fighting because she had knocked, and he had chosen to open. The hunters snarled, their torches lifted high. They did not understand, could not understand. Mercy was weakness to them, compassion a disease to be crushed, and so they charged again. The battle was brutal, snow turning red under their boots. The man fought with every ounce of strength, his body aching, his breath burning. The girl fought too, each strike of her poker filled with fury born of pain. Together they stood, fragile but unbroken. Together they fought, hard against hate. But the numbers pressed hard. The man was thrown back, his rifle knocked aside. The leader raised his blade high, aiming for his heart. The girl screamed, rushing forward. "No," she cried. And for the first time since her world had burned, her voice carried power. She struck with all her strength, the iron poker clashing against the blade. The sound rang out, sharp and bright in the frozen night. The leader staggered back, shocked by the force of her strike. Her eyes blazed with fire, her voice shaking but fierce. "You will not take him." The hunters froze for a moment, surprised. They had hunted her as prey, weak and broken, but here she was, standing tall, defying them, and beside her stood a man who had chosen mercy over fear. The leader's face twisted with rage. "You are both fools," he spat. "You cannot win. You are nothing against us." The man rose again, bruised but unbroken. He stood beside the girl, his hand steady on her shoulder. His voice was low but carried strength. "We are not nothing," he said. "We are the 13th door." The girl's heart shook at his words. She felt it deep inside, the bond that had been born in fire and fear. For the first time, trust was no longer fragile. It was real, unshakable, forged. In the choice he had made, the hunters drew back, regrouping, their torches burning brighter. The night was not over. The fight was not done. But something had changed. The girl no longer saw herself as a victim. She was not begging, not running. She was standing because one human had chosen mercy. The forest echoed with the sound of the hunters preparing to strike again. The cabin stood in the clearing, its door open, its fire burning, and at that threshold stood two figures side by side. Not prey and protector, not victim and savior, but allies bound by the human choice. The choice to open, the choice to fight, the choice to stand. The night was alive with fire and snow. The hunters circled the cabin, their torches glowing like angry stars in the dark forest. The girl and the man stood side by side at the open door, their breath rising in white clouds. Her hands gripped the iron poker, his hands held the rifle. They were outnumbered, outmatched, but their hearts burned brighter than the storm. The leader of the hunters stepped forward again, his eyes blazing with fury. "You cannot win," he growled. "Stand aside, and we may still let you live." His words cut through the night, sharp as ice. But the man's voice answered, steady and unshaken, "You will not have her." The hunters roared and charged, their boots crushing the snow. The man fired, the rifle's crack echoing into the trees. One hunter fell, another stumbled, but still they came. The girl swung her poker with trembling strength, striking at the shadows that rushed toward her, the air filled with the clash of steel, the cry of battle, the pounding of desperate hearts. The cabin walls shook with the force of the fight. Torches fell into the snow, hissing as flames met ice. The hunters pressed harder, snarling like wolves, but the man did not fall. Every strike, every shot was for her. Every breath was proof of the choice he had made. The girl felt her strength fading, but her spirit rose higher. She remembered the 12 doors that had closed, the faces that had turned cold. She remembered her mother's voice telling her to run, but she no longer wished to run. She stood, she fought, because the 13th door had opened, and in that opening she had found a reason to live. The leader lunged, his blade flashing. The man blocked with the rifle, sparks flying. The girl cried out and swung the poker, striking the leader across the arm. He staggered, snarling, his eyes filled with rage. "You dare strike me," he spat. "You dare defy your fate." The girl's chest heaved, her voice shaking but strong. "I am not your prey," she said. "I am not nothing." The words echoed louder than the storm. For a moment, even the hunters faltered. The leader's face twisted with hatred. "You will learn," he hissed, and he raised his blade once more. The man moved in front of her, his body a shield. He stared into the leader's eyes, his voice like thunder. "No, she will not learn fear from you. She will learn that mercy is stronger than hate." With a roar, the leader struck. The clash was brutal, blade against steel, flesh against fire. The man's strength wavered, his body battered, but he did not fall. The girl screamed, raising her poker again, striking with every ounce of strength left in her. The leader stumbled back, his blade dropping into the snow. Silence fell for a heartbeat. The hunters froze, their eyes wide, their leader on his knees. The girl's chest heaved, her hands shaking, but her eyes burned with fire. The man stood over the fallen enemy, his breath ragged, his face fierce. The leader glared up at him, hatred still alive in his eyes. "Do it," he spat. "Kill me. Prove you are no different." The girl looked at the man, her heart trembling. She feared what choice he would make. Would he kill? Would he show them the same cruelty they had shown? Her hands tightened, whispering softly, "Please, show mercy." The man's breath slowed, his rifle heavy in his hands. His eyes burned with pain, with anger, with the weight of every loss he had ever carried. But then he looked at her, her face pale, her tears shining, her voice trembling with hope. And he remembered. He remembered the boy he had been, begging at closed doors, praying for mercy. He remembered the silence, the rejection, the despair. And he chose differently. He lowered the rifle, his voice low but steady. "No," he said, "I will not be like you." The Lao Ader's eyes widened, his mouth twisting in disbelief. The hunters muttered, uncertain, their unity breaking. The girl's heart leapt, her tears falling fast. He had chosen mercy, even for his enemy. Her voice shook as she whispered, "A human with a heart." The leader staggered to his feet, clutching his wounded arm. His eyes burned with shame, with anger, but also with fear. "Leave," the man commanded, his voice carrying power. "Take your hate and go. This door will never open for you again." For the first time, the hunters did not move forward. They stepped back, uncertain, broken. Without their leader's strength, they were only shadows. One by one, they faded into the forest. The snow swallowed their footsteps. The night swallowed their hate. The clearing fell silent again. The firelight flickered. The storm had ended. The man lowered his rifle, his body heavy, his breath slow. The girl dropped the poker, her knees weak, her tears streaming. She stumbled forward and fell against him. Her voice cracked, soft and full of life. The 13th door. It had a human with a heart. He stood still for a moment, then placed a hand gently on her back. His eyes stared into the distance, into the forest where the hunters had gone. He knew they would return one day, but for now, mercy had won. For now, two broken souls had found each other. For now, the cabin stood not as a shelter of wood and fire, but as a beacon of hope. And in the falling snow, where 12 doors had closed, the 13th remained open. A choice, a bond, a mercy that would never fade.